If you had told me 5 years ago that a black plastic box and a pair of wireless headphones would become my biggest competition in marriage, I would have laughed. Mark and I used to be inseparable. Movie nights, spontaneous road trips, cooking together, even folding laundry turned into a joke-filled affair. But somewhere between our second anniversary and Mark losing his job, the laughter faded. What started as a coping mechanism, a few harmless hours on the PlayStation, became a second marriage, one he didn't invite me into. At first, I didn't mind. I mean, everyone needs an escape. I tried to be understanding. Just a phase, I told myself. He'll bounce back. But weeks turned into months, and slowly I became invisible. I'd walk into the room, and he'd be locked in, headset on, eyes glazed, fingers dancing over the controller like a pianist in a frenzy. If I asked a question, he'd grunt. If I tried to share something about my day, he'd nod, eyes never leaving the screen. I began to shrink. Emotionally, it was like being married to a ghost. There's a kind of loneliness that comes from being physically next to someone and still feeling completely alone. It eats at you slowly. A quiet hunger. I tried everything, wearing his favorite dress, leaving sweet notes on the fridge, suggesting walks, dinner nights, even joining him once, sitting awkwardly beside him as he played. He didn't even notice when I left the room after 30 minutes. I stopped asking, stopped trying. I filled my time with books, podcasts, long walks, and eventually solo dinners. And that's where I met Elijah. I didn't set out to meet anyone. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I had just finished grocery shopping when I wandered into the small bookstore next to the market. A soft jazz tune played overhead. I was flipping through a poetry book when a voice behind me said, "Rupi Kaur? She gets me through the hard days." I turned, startled. He was tall, dressed casually, with kind eyes that looked straight into mine. Not through me, not past me, at me. We chatted about poetry, about the smell of books, about rainy days and how they make us nostalgic. He didn't flirt. He didn't try to impress me. He just saw me. It had been so long since someone did. I started going back to that bookstore. It wasn't about Elijah at first. It was the space. Quiet, warm, human. But Elijah was often there too. And eventually, we started sharing coffee on the bench outside. Talking turned into laughter. Laughter turned into comfort. Comfort into connection. I never crossed the line, not physically, but emotionally, I was leaning hard. One day, as I was telling him about a childhood memory, he stopped me and said gently, "You speak like someone who's been holding their breath for years." It undid me. I came home that evening to Mark screaming into his headset, furious at a teammate who cost him the win. I stood in the doorway, holding my coat, watching the man I had loved so deeply become someone I barely recognized. My eyes filled with tears, not the loud kind, the quiet, tired kind that burn and settle. I didn't say a word. I walked past him, into our room, and closed the door. I didn't even bother with dinner. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how love dies. Elijah asked me a question the next day that changed everything. "Are you happy?" I opened my mouth to lie. I really did, but nothing came out. Because no, I wasn't. I hadn't been for years, and for the first time, I realized it wasn't just Mark's fault. It was mine too, for staying silent, for enabling the drift, for letting myself disappear. That night, I came home and sat across from Mark. No TV, no headset. "I'm not happy," I said. He didn't even look at me, just muttered, "I'm tired, Amelia. Can we talk later?" Later never came. I packed quietly the next morning. No drama, no confrontation. Just folded clothes, my journals, my favorite mug, and a pair of old sandals he used to say looked ridiculous but adorable on me. Mark didn't notice. Not the sound of the suitcase wheels, not the open closet, not the echo of absence beginning to form in our small apartment. He had his headset on. I paused at the door, my heart thudded with a mix of guilt and grief. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. And as I closed the door, I whispered, "I miss you, Mark." He didn't hear me. I moved into a short-term rental near the edge of town, a small one-bedroom with creaky floors and plants in the window from the previous tenant. It smelled like lavender and change. The first few days I slept a lot, ate little, read poems aloud to remind myself what my voice sounded like. I wasn't sure what would come next. I just knew I couldn't keep drowning in silence. Elijah checked in, texted occasionally. He didn't press, didn't intrude, just made sure I knew someone was thinking of me. I missed Mark, desperately, but I couldn't go back to being invisible. 2 weeks later, I came home from a walk to find a letter slipped under my door. I didn't hear you leave, but I noticed you were gone the next morning. I thought you went to the store. Then I saw your closet. Then your mug was gone. And I finally heard the silence. Not the peaceful kind. The terrifying kind. I'm sorry, Amelia. Mark. I stared at the paper for a long time. Then I cried in a way I hadn't let myself cry in years. It wasn't about him, not fully. It was about mourning the life we used to have and wondering if it was too far gone. That night, I stood in front of the mirror brushing my hair, and for the first time, I looked at myself not as someone's wife, but as a woman who had survived something quiet and cruel. Emotional neglect doesn't leave bruises, but it does leave emptiness. And I had let it define me. In the reflection, I whispered the truth. I still love him, but love alone wasn't enough. He had to want this too. He had to choose us. So I wrote back. I'm not angry. I just didn't know how to keep fading. If you want to talk, I'm open. But only if you're really ready to listen. He came the next evening. No headset, no controller, no excuses. Just Mark. His hair messy, eyes red, holding the same hoodie I had stolen from him years ago and never returned. I haven't turned on the console since you left, he said. I've been sitting in that house hearing echoes of your voice. The one I used to love waking up to? The one I started tuning out without meaning to? I didn't speak. I just let him keep going. I don't know when I stopped choosing you. I thought I was coping, but I was escaping. And I left you behind. My tears came fast. He took a step forward, then paused. Can I sit? We talked for 3 hours. About the numbness, the hurt, the years we lost. I told him about Elijah, not as a weapon, but as a mirror. Someone who showed me what it felt like to be seen again. Mark didn't get angry. He just nodded and whispered. I let it get that far. We cried, we laughed, we made tea. We sat on the floor like we used to, backs against the couch, knees touching. That night he held my hand and asked something he hadn't in years. Can I try again? And for the first time, I believed him. We didn't fix everything overnight. We did counseling. We unplugged more. We built habits, game-free nights, dinner table conversations, walks where we held hands again. He bought a journal and started writing. I bought 2 controllers and learned to play with him, not to save us, but because we chose each other this time. He still games, but now he games after life happens, not instead of it. Sometimes I catch him watching me while I read. And when I ask why, he smiles and says, I'm just grateful. I'm still healing. But the console? It's no longer the third person in our marriage, just a toy, not a home. We didn't rush back into each other's arms, despite the softness that returned to Mark's eyes. We were cautious, like 2 people learning a dance we once knew but had forgotten. He would call before visiting, respecting my space. Sometimes he brought takeout, and we would eat on the floor, laughing about how we were too lazy to get chairs. One night after dinner, he stood up and extended his hand. No music played, but he hummed softly, and we slow danced in my tiny living room, my cheek pressed against his shoulder, feeling his warmth again. I missed this, he whispered. I did too. We decided to go to counseling. It wasn't easy. Mark struggled to find the words at first, and I had to fight the urge to speak for him. I don't know how to say I was wrong, he told our therapist, eyes lowered. I thought I could handle everything alone, and I pushed Amelia aside while convincing myself it was temporary. The therapist nodded. Temporary can become permanent if you never stop. Mark squeezed my hand. I'm sorry, Amelia, for making you feel alone while I was right there. Hearing him acknowledge it out loud in front of someone else unraveled another knot inside me. Healing started to feel real. One morning, Mark arrived holding a small box. I found this in the dishwasher, he said. It was my mug, the one I had taken when I left. I didn't realize how much seeing it on the counter meant to me until it was gone. He placed it on the table between us. It wasn't just a mug anymore. It was a symbol of coming home, I'd like it back on our counter, he whispered. And for the first time I said, me too. We made a promise. No games after 6 p.m. on weekdays. Instead, we cooked dinner together. Sometimes we burned the rice and ordered pizza. Sometimes we sat in silence, letting the comfort of simply being together fill the air. Mark still played on weekends, but he would glance at me often, checking in, inviting me to join, or pausing to share a funny moment. I don't want you to feel like a ghost anymore, he told me one Friday evening. I don't want to feel like one either, I replied, leaning into him as he wrapped an arm around me. As part of therapy, our counselor asked us to write letters to each other, letters we might never send. In mine, I wrote about the nights I cried alone, the birthdays he missed because of one more match, the dinners that went cold, and how small I felt. But I also wrote about the Mark I fell in love with, the one who once stayed up all night baking a cake for my birthday, the one who held me after my father died, the one who made me laugh until I snorted. He read the letter in silence, tears slipping down his cheeks. I'm so sorry I made you feel invisible, he said, voice cracking. I'm glad you see me now, I whispered. One night, Mark turned off the console mid-game, took off his headset, and looked at me. I love gaming, but I love you more. I choose you, Amelia. Every time. I knew it wasn't about quitting games forever. It was about choosing us over the noise, over the escapes, over the fear of facing life's messiness. I stepped closer, touched his cheek, and whispered, I choose you too. We didn't fix everything in that moment. We didn't magically erase the years of distance, but we chose each other, fully, intentionally. And for the first time in years, I felt seen. I felt loved. I felt home. We still have our moments. Sometimes Mark slips, playing a little too long, but now he notices when I walk into the room, pausing to pull me into his lap for a quick kiss. Sometimes I still feel afraid of disappearing again, but I remind myself that my voice matters, and I use it. We learn to live together again. We cook, we walk, we argue and make up, we play games together. I'm surprisingly good at racing games, and sometimes we just sit quietly, holding hands, grateful for the second chance we gave each other. Love didn't save us. We chose to save ourselves, and then we chose each other. And in this small, imperfect, beautiful life, that choice is enough.